Elena hummed a soft tune as she stirred a large pot of arroz con leche, the sweet scent filling the cozy kitchen of Casa Esperanza, House of Hope. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Casa Esperanza wasn't just a building. It was a sanctuary. It was a place where women who had nowhere else to go could find safety, support, and a chance to rebuild their lives. Elena, with her warm smile and gentle eyes, was the heart of it all. She had come to the United States from Nicaragua years ago, fleeing political turmoil and seeking a better future. She had a humanitarian visa, allowing her to live and work in the U.S. legally, driven by a deep desire to help others. She understood the fear and uncertainty these women felt. Many had escaped abusive relationships. Some had faced homelessness, and all were carrying heavy burdens. At Casa Esperanza, they found more than just a roof over their heads. They found a community, a family. Elena taught them English, helped them find jobs, and, most importantly, listened to their stories without judgment. She was a beacon of hope in their darkest hours, always ready with a comforting word or a warm embrace. She believed everyone deserved a second chance, and she dedicated her life to providing it. Elena's journey to the United States wasn't easy. She remembered the day she left Nicaragua like it was yesterday. The fear, the uncertainty, the hope for something better clinging to her like the humid air. Political unrest had gripped her country, making it unsafe for her and her family. She had witnessed things no one should ever see, and the memories haunted her. The humanitarian visa was her lifeline. It allowed her to escape the danger and seek refuge in a country that promised freedom and opportunity. The application process was long and arduous, filled with paperwork and interviews. She had to prove that she was fleeing persecution and that she had a genuine fear for her safety. When the visa was finally approved, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. She knew she was one of the lucky ones. Many others were still trapped, unable to escape the violence and oppression. She chose to come to the United States because she believed in its ideals. She believed in the promise of a better life, a life where she could be safe and free. And she wanted to give back, to help others who were struggling, just as she had been helped. That's why she dedicated herself to Casa Esperanza, pouring her heart and soul into creating a haven for women who needed it most. She wanted to pay forward the kindness she had received. The morning of the raid started like any other. The aroma of coffee and freshly baked bread filled Casa Esperanza. Women chatted softly in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the day. A sense of normalcy and peace permeated the air. Elena was helping young Sophia with her English homework at the kitchen table. Suddenly, a loud banging echoed through the house. Before anyone could react, the front door burst open and several uniformed ICE officers stormed inside. Their faces were stern, their movements swift and purposeful. The peaceful atmosphere shattered instantly. A wave of fear washed over the women. Some gasped, others screamed, and some froze in place, their eyes wide with terror. Sophia clung to Elena, trembling like a leaf. The officers barked orders in English, a language that many of the women didn't fully understand. The language barrier only amplified the confusion and panic. Immigration and customs enforcement. "Everyone, stay where you are," one of the officers shouted. The officers began moving through the house, demanding to see identification and asking questions about immigration status. The women, already vulnerable and traumatized, felt their safe haven being invaded, their sense of security ripped away. The air crackled with tension and uncertainty. Elena, trying to remain calm, held Sophia close and whispered reassuring words in Spanish. She knew she had to protect these women, even as her own heart pounded with dread. An officer approached Elena, his expression unreadable. "Your name?" he asked, his voice devoid of warmth. "Elena Rodriguez," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. She reached for her purse, pulling out her wallet and carefully extracting her humanitarian visa. She handed it to the officer, hoping to quickly clear up any misunderstanding. The officer examined the visa closely, his eyes scanning the document. "You are accused of working illegally," he stated flatly. Elena's heart sank. But this visa allows me to work," she protested, her voice rising in desperation. "I run this shelter. I don't get paid. I do it to help these women." "That's not what our information shows," the officer retorted, ignoring her explanation. "You're coming with us." He signaled to another officer, who stepped forward and placed handcuffs on Elena's wrists. The metal felt cold and heavy against her skin. The women in the shelter gasped, their faces etched with disbelief and horror. Sophia began to sob uncontrollably, reaching out for Elena. "No, please, don't take her," Sophia cried, her voice filled with anguish. Elena's eyes welled up with tears as she looked at the women, her heart breaking. "It's okay," she said, trying to reassure them, though her own fear was overwhelming. "Everything will be all right. Take care of each other." The officers led Elena out of the shelter, leaving behind a scene of chaos and despair. The door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. The silence Elena's departure left behind was quickly replaced by a chorus of sobs and whispered anxieties. Sophia, still trembling, buried her face in Maria's skirt, her small body shaking with grief. Maria, a strong woman who had found refuge at Casa Esperanza after escaping a violent marriage, wrapped her arms around Sophia, trying to offer comfort. "She'll be back, Mija," Maria whispered, though her own voice trembled with uncertainty. "Elena is strong. She'll be back." But the other women weren't so sure. Fear rippled through the house. They had all come to Casa Esperanza seeking safety, and now their safe haven felt threatened. Would they be next? Would IC return and take them away too? Isabella, a young woman who had recently arrived from El Salvador, began to cry silently, her eyes filled with terror. She had already experienced so much trauma in her life, and the raid had reawakened all her old fears. Rosa, an older woman who had been at Casa Esperanza for several months, tried to rally the others. "We can't give up hope," she said, her voice firm despite the tears streaming down her face. "Elena wouldn't want us to. We have to do something. We have to help her." The women looked at each other, a spark of determination flickering in their eyes. They knew they had to act. They had to fight for Elena, the woman who had given them so much. They might be scared, but they were also strong, and they were not alone. They would find a way to help Elena, even if they didn't know how just yet. The next day, the women of Casa Esperanza gathered outside the detention center, their faces etched with a mixture of determination and apprehension. They carried hand-painted signs with messages of support for Elena. "Free Elena now. Elena is innocent. Casa Esperanza needs Elena." The detention center was a cold, imposing building surrounded by a high fence and barbed wire. The women felt intimidated, but they refused to be silenced. They chanted Elena's name, their voices growing louder and more confident with each repetition. Maria, holding Sophia's hand tightly, stepped forward to speak to the small crowd that had gathered. "Elena has done nothing wrong," she declared, her voice ringing with passion. "She has dedicated her life to helping women like us. She is a good person, and she deserves to be free." Other women shared their stories about how Elena had helped them, providing them with food, shelter, and hope. They spoke about her kindness, her compassion, and her unwavering belief in their potential. A small group of reporters had arrived, drawn by the unusual sight of women protesting outside the detention center. They interviewed Maria and the other women, listening intently to their stories. The women knew that their protest might not be enough to secure Elena's release, but they were determined to do everything they could. They wanted to show Elena that she was not forgotten, that they were fighting for her, and that they would not rest until she was back where she belonged at Casa Esperanza, helping women rebuild their lives. Their small act of defiance was a testament to Elena's impact on their lives. Sarah Miller, a reporter for the local newspaper, the City Gazette, was covering a routine city council meeting when she received a tip about the protest outside the detention center. Intrigued, she decided to investigate. As she listened to the women's stories, Sarah felt a growing sense of outrage. Elena's case seemed unjust, and the women's devotion to her was undeniable. She knew there was a story here, a story that needed to be told. Sarah began digging into Elena's background, contacting immigration lawyers and reviewing official documents. She quickly discovered that Elena's humanitarian visa was indeed valid and that she was legally authorized to work in the United States. The accusation of illegal employment seemed completely unfounded. Sarah couldn't understand why ICE had arrested Elena in the first place. Was it a mistake? Or was there something more sinister at play? She felt compelled to uncover the truth. She spent hours researching immigration laws and procedures, interviewing experts, and piecing together the puzzle. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that Elena had been wrongly targeted. She knew she had to expose this injustice and help get Elena released. Sarah began writing her story, meticulously documenting her findings and weaving together the personal accounts of the women at Casa Esperanza with the legal and political context of Elena's case. She hoped her article would shed light on the situation and put pressure on ICE to correct their mistake. Sarah worked tirelessly, poring over documents and conducting interviews late into the night. She double-checked every fact, ensuring the accuracy of her reporting. She knew that the stakes were high and that Elena's future depended on her ability to expose the truth. Finally, after days of relentless effort, Sarah's article was published on the front page of the City Gazette. The headline screamed, "ICE wrongly arrests shelter director. Valid visa ignored." The article detailed Elena's background, her humanitarian work at Casa Esperanza, and the circumstances of her arrest. It presented compelling evidence that Elena's visa was valid and that the accusation of illegal employment was baseless. The article also highlighted the stories of the women at Casa Esperanza, their struggles, and their reliance on Elena's support. It painted a vivid picture of a community torn apart by injustice. The response to Sarah's article was immediate and overwhelming. Readers were outraged by Elena's arrest and the apparent disregard for her legal rights. The City Gazette received hundreds of calls and emails from people expressing their support for Elena and demanding her release. The story quickly spread to other news outlets, both local and national, amplifying the public outcry. It was clear that Sarah's reporting had struck a chord and that the tide was turning in Elena's favor. The story of Elena's wrongful arrest quickly spread like wildfire across social media. People from all walks of life shared Sarah's article, expressing their outrage and demanding justice. Hashtags like #FreeElena and #CasaEsperanza began trending, uniting supporters from across the country and even around the world. Celebrities and influencers joined the chorus, amplifying the message and reaching even wider audiences. Online petitions were launched, garnering hundreds of thousands of signatures in a matter of days. The public pressure on ICE was mounting. News channels broadcasted live updates from outside the detention center, where the women of Casa Esperanza continued their vigil, joined by growing numbers of supporters. The protests became larger and more organized, with volunteers providing food, water, and legal assistance to the demonstrators. The viral spread of Elena's story forced ICE to respond. Initially, they defended their actions, claiming that they were simply enforcing immigration laws. However, as the evidence of Elena's valid visa became undeniable, they began to backpedal, suggesting that there had been a clerical error. But the public wasn't buying it. They demanded accountability and transparency. They wanted to know why Elena had been targeted in the first place and who was responsible for the mistake. The calls for Elena's release grew louder and more insistent, fueled by the power of social media and the unwavering support of the community. Meanwhile, a team of lawyers, moved by Elena's plight and the outpouring of public support, offered their services pro bono. They worked tirelessly, filing legal motions and gathering evidence to challenge Elena's detention. They argued that her arrest was unlawful and violated her rights as a legal resident of the United States. One of the lawyers, a compassionate woman named Ms. Ramirez, visited Elena in detention. She explained the legal options available to her and reassured her that they were doing everything they could to secure her release. Elena, though exhausted and disheartened, found strength in Ms. Ramirez's words and the knowledge that so many people were fighting for her. She clung to the hope that justice would prevail and that she would soon be reunited with the women of Casa Esperanza. Ms. Ramirez and her team filed a writ of habeas corpus, a legal petition demanding that the government justify Elena's detention. They argued that ICE had failed to provide any valid reason for her arrest and that her continued detention was unlawful. The judge in the case, after reviewing the evidence and hearing arguments from both sides, agreed that ICE had made a mistake. He ordered Elena's immediate release, citing the clear evidence of her valid visa and the lack of any credible basis for her detention. The news spread quickly, sending a wave of joy and relief through the community. The fight for Elena was finally over, and she was coming home. The day of Elena's release was filled with anticipation and excitement. The women of Casa Esperanza gathered outside the detention center, their faces beaming with joy. They held signs, sang songs, and embraced each other, their hearts overflowing with gratitude and relief. As Elena walked through the doors of the detention center, a hush fell over the crowd. She looked tired and drawn, but her eyes sparkled with happiness. She took a deep breath of fresh air and smiled, her face radiating warmth and relief. Sophia ran toward Elena, throwing her arms around her legs and burying her face in her skirt. "Elena, you're back!" she cried, her voice filled with pure joy. Elena knelt down and hugged Sophia tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm back, Mija," she whispered. "I'm back." The other women rushed forward, embracing Elena and showering her with kisses and hugs. They were a family reunited, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they had endured. As Elena stood surrounded by the women of Casa Esperanza, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She was grateful for their love and support, for the lawyers who had fought for her release, and for the community that had rallied behind her. She knew that she had been given a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it. She would continue to dedicate her life to helping women in need, providing them with a safe haven and a chance to rebuild their lives. The aftermath of Elena's ordeal brought both challenges and opportunities. Casa Esperanza had suffered during her absence. Donations had dwindled, and some of the women had left, fearing further ICE raids. Elena knew that she had a lot of work to do to rebuild the shelter and restore the women's sense of security. However, the publicity surrounding Elena's case had also brought positive attention to Casa Esperanza. Donations poured in from people all over the world who had been touched by her story. Volunteers offered their time and expertise to help with repairs, fundraising, and providing support services to the women. Elena used her newfound platform to advocate for immigrant rights and to raise awareness about the challenges faced by vulnerable women. She spoke at rallies, gave interviews, and shared her story with anyone who would listen. She became a powerful voice for change, inspiring others to stand up for justice and compassion. Sarah Miller, the reporter who had broken Elena's story, continued to follow her journey, documenting her efforts to rebuild Casa Esperanza and her advocacy work. She wrote a series of articles about Elena's impact on the community, highlighting the importance of supporting organizations that provide essential services to vulnerable populations. The experience had changed Elena, but it had also strengthened her resolve. She had faced adversity and injustice, but she had emerged stronger and more determined than ever to make a difference in the world. She knew that her work was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she was not alone. Elena's story became a symbol of resilience and hope for immigrant communities across the country. She received letters and messages from people who had been inspired by her courage and her unwavering commitment to helping others. Many saw her as a hero, a beacon of light in a world often filled with darkness. She used her platform to advocate for policy changes that would protect the rights of immigrants and ensure that no one else would have to endure what she had gone through. She met with lawmakers, testified before Congress, and worked with advocacy groups to push for comprehensive immigration reform. Elena also made sure to give back to the community that had supported her so fiercely. She organized fundraising events for Casa Esperanza, providing scholarships for the women to pursue their education and start their own businesses. She also created a mentorship program, pairing the women with successful professionals who could provide guidance and support. Casa Esperanza became a model for other shelters and organizations that served vulnerable populations. Elena shared her knowledge and expertise, helping them to improve their services and expand their reach. She believed that everyone deserved a safe and supportive environment, regardless of their background or circumstances. Years later, Elena continued to lead Casa Esperanza, her dedication unwavering. The shelter thrived, providing a haven for countless women in need. Elena's story served as a reminder that even in the face of adversity, hope can prevail and that one person can make a difference in the world. And so, the story of Elena Rodriguez became a testament to the power of hope, resilience, and community. It was a reminder that even in the face of injustice, ordinary people can make extraordinary things happen. Elena continued to lead Casa Esperanza, her heart filled with love and compassion for the women she served. She never forgot the fear and uncertainty she had felt during her detention, and she used that experience to fuel her advocacy work. Sophia, who had clung to Elena's skirt during the raid, grew up to become a strong and independent young woman. She was inspired by Elena's example and dedicated her life to helping others, becoming a social worker and advocating for the rights of immigrants and refugees. Sarah Miller continued to write about social justice issues, using her platform to shine a light on the stories of marginalized communities. She remained a close friend of Elena and a strong supporter of Casa Esperanza. The women of Casa Esperanza, each with their own unique story of survival and resilience, formed a strong and supportive community. They learned from each other, encouraged each other, and celebrated each other's successes. They were a family, bound together by their shared experiences and their unwavering hope for a better future. And Elena, the kind woman from Nicaragua who had come to the United States seeking refuge, continued to be the heart of it all, her love and compassion shining brightly, illuminating the path for others to follow. Her legacy lived on, inspiring generations to come.